This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. In this episode, I have my good friend Ken Roybal with me. Ken from
Hello.
From policebackground.net.
That's me. Yes.
That's Ken for all your background needs. Ken, today we have one. I've been excited for an interview like this for a while because this is a gentleman that works across the pond, as they say, over in England. He is a special constable.
Special constable.
Yes.
That's like reserve officer in the United States, I think.
As far as I can tell, it seems like it's like a reserve position. He's a younger guy. He's got some stories, he says. So, yeah, I've just got a bunch of questions for him. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, come on, a Bobby.
Come on, one of Robert Peel's boys?
No, what do Bobbies do? Scotland Yard, Bobby, MI5, all this kind of stuff. James Bond. I mean, come on, this is going to be great.
Yes, very, very excited. He wants to use a pseudonym, so he doesn't want his name out there. His name is it's a very unique name, so I kind of understand. We're gonna call him Bill.
Bill.
We could go with Bobby, but it's a little too on the nose, I think.
Policeman Bill. Oh no.
Yeah, Mr. Hand. All right.
Mr. Hand.
Okay, now Ken, I will do through the magic of technology, I will add someone to our call who's all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. That's what I'm going to attempt to do. So this is one time, the first time we ever did this, it worked really seamlessly, and every time since it's been a problem. But
that's what editing's for. If it doesn't work,
exactly. And also the other thing about England, it's the third largest audience for the podcast. So it goes U.S., Canada, and England. So there's actually
wow.
I've had a lot of contact with Bobbies over the last couple months, and this is the first time someone's actually been willing to come on. A lot of them are shy to come on, or they don't think they're intimidated. I don't know what it is, but they like the show, but then they always have a friend they want to refer, and then I never hear from anybody. So, I mean, I don't think they're afraid to speak out, because I know for a fact there's stand-up comics over there that are Bobbies, and like their whole routine is making fun of management. So I think they say what they want, but I just want to add that because this adds to my excitement. Okay, here we go. Bill, are you there?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, my man. How you doing over there?
I'm not so bad, thank you very much. It's quite chilly over here at the moment. I believe it's the afternoon where you are. How's the weather?
Here in Southern California, it's good. It's about 60 degrees. Not too bad. We're also on with Ken, retired LAPD. Ken is in the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, Bill, what's happening?
Good evening, Ken. It's good to hear you.
Out there, man. We're about 50 degrees out here. I'm in Washington. Yeah, good.
So what?
I'm presuming you're talking Fahrenheit as well. I don't understand Fahrenheit. I'm all Celsius.
Yeah, I'm wearing a sweater. That's universal language. So I'm not wearing a jacket. I'm wearing a sweater, but I'm inside. So we're doing okay out here.
Bill, we're gonna have to. There's definitely gonna be a little delay. I think just come for the distance of the call. So we'll do our best with everybody chiming in here. So if there's some if we talk over each other or whatever,
totally
no worries. So Bill, you contacted the show and were willing to come on as the first English police officer, which is very exciting to us. And you hold the position or held the position as special constable, correct?
Used to be a special constable. That's right. Yes, I'm now a community support officer.
Okay, can you explain to us what a special constable does in England? Because here we know we have special officers as well. Usually they're part-time or they're sometimes support officers.
The equivalent I can think of is a reserve deputy. So you're a volunteer with you're sworn in, but you just get paid a basic expense allowance. You're not salaried.
Okay, so that you kind of work as needed.
That's what I used to do. I did that for about a year, and then they were offering paid work, and I was just coming to the end of my studies. So, I changed hats, basically.
Okay, and what is the job you're doing now?
A community support officer is a full-time paid but not sworn in member of uniformed police staff. So predominantly I do neighbourhood policing or community policing, depending where you are, what you call it, and a lot of foot patrol.
Okay, so you're out there in the community, and is the goal to go fully sworn, or are you happy in where you are?
Oh, I get asked this quite a lot because the length of time that I've been a community support officer is quite unusual. It's kind of expected that you would change roles. If I change roles, I have to start again on a pay scale. The thing that bothers me the most is how much annual leave entitlement that I'd lose. So at the moment, I'm happy as I am. Okay,
very good. Ken, did you have any questions up front?
I'm just kind of curious. It's a police officer position that you're in now?
It is, but it's not a constable. So I have limited powers of arrest. But I get involved in, all sorts, really. If you're nearby and there's a call comes out, you go to it. That's the way it works.
But it's not a sworn position, and it's not a special constable position.
No, it's not. No, so I don't have the full powers and privileges of a constable, as is to use the phraseology. But it's how do I describe it? It was a role that was created about 2003, and they wanted to bridge the gap between the police and the communities. That's primarily what it was there to do.
Okay, then you can act in a support role when if a constable needs you. If there's a call going on nearby, you're free to respond to that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I think I don't know anybody that wouldn't respond to a call nearby. It's expected that you do it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Is it a stepping stone to another job within the police department where you would go to a different position from there, or is that pretty much it for that position?
It can be a stepping stone. It depends which police force you work for. For some, let's say you wanted to be a constable, they would make you do a full recruitment application process from scratch. Others, they would have a shortened process because you've already passed a medical, you've already passed your fitness test, you've done your written exams. So those three examples I gave you there, it's the same for a constable as what I've done for my role.
Bill, sorry we're hammering you with the questions. We just don't know anything about how it works.
It's totally fine.
It's really interesting.
You're not the first people I've had to explain it to at all, so don't worry about that at all.
Okay. So also, I'm curious, to be a special constable, what kind of training's required or involved for that? Is that like an abbreviated police academy, or do you have to go through the full training of a constable?
You don't do the full 21 weeks that my force does. It varies from force to force how long you do your initial training. For special constables, because you're volunteers, it's mostly weekends. So in my force, you'll travel up to London on a Friday evening. You'll do Saturday and Sunday, and then travel home Sunday evening. And you do, I think it's 16 weekends. It takes quite some time to do it because they don't get you coming back each weekend. They have gaps because they recognise the fact that you need to have a family life and a social life and what have you.
Okay, so that's kind of on the job training. Then you don't go do like an official academy so many weeks in a row.
Oh no, you do go to the training school to do those weekends.
Oh, okay, so that's a lot like here in the States. A lot of the states offer the intermittent academy. You can go weekends for 6 months, or you can go nights for 3 months. So it sounds pretty similar.
Yeah, and on the LAPD, and I believe this is still the same, is if you're going to be a line officer work in the field, I think that's 9 months part-time, and it's 6 months if you're just going to be a reserve officer working in the station, auxiliary type of duties, but it's all part-time. I want to say it's on the weekends or something like that too. So it takes longer, but it's a full academy. For instance, if you're a line officer carrying a gun with LAPD and you're reserve, you go through the whole academy, but it's a long time.
And you know what's worse? If you want to go from part-time to full-time, they make you do the full-time academy all over again, correct?
Yeah.
Well, they've experimented in the UK with those going from community support officer to PC or from special constable to PC, having shortened training school because they recognise the fact that the Public Order Act hasn't changed. You've already trained in the offences of the Public Order Act. So why do you need to do the classroom time again? The computer system hasn't changed. You've already been trained how to use the computer system. So why do you need to have that sort of classroom time again? So they're experimenting in different forces with knocking whole weeks off the training program.
That's good.
That's too logical for California. That's asking too much.
Yeah. You see, we're entering the realms of logic and common sense now, and I'm pretty sure it translates internationally that somebody somewhere sits bolt upright in an office and says, "Hang on a minute, they're using common sense here. Let's get going. I've got to stop this."
Let's do it my way. Bill, I'm sorry. Bill, I have a question for you. You're mentioning the different forces out there in the United States. Each city, each county, each state, they have different police agencies. And is that the way it is? Because for some reason, I always thought it was Scotland Yard and it's the National Police organization. Is that not the case?
No, that's not the case. There are some national police forces. I belong to one of them, but most territorial policing, your day-to-day police, as in if a crime happens at your house or in the street, usually you'll be on the jurisdiction of the local force. They're geographic, but there is some specialisms that are done regionally between the different forces. But predominantly, your day-to-day policing is done by your local geographic force. Now, if memory serves me correctly, there's something like 5,000 plus law enforcement agencies in the USA. We have 43 main police forces, 3 national police forces. There's also what I would call our very poor, cheap equivalent of the FBI, which is the National Crime Agency. We have those as well. But if you go north of the border into Scotland, there's only about 5 different agencies working there because they're trying a national policing model up there at the moment.
So what is Scotland Yard?
Scotland Yard is the name of the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police. So that's the London, the main London police force.
Oh, interesting.
I think where I get this from is that every time I've seen a police show or a movie or something where they show the British police, they all wear the exact same uniform as far as I could tell. And in the United States, there's different badges, different uniforms, and you could tell they're different jurisdictions. But I've never been able to discern if a police officer in Britain was from a different force.
You could now, if you were to wander around the country, you would definitely see variations in the uniform because some forces have still got the traditional custodian helmets and the bowler hat for the ladies, with flat caps if you're going out on the vehicles. Other forces now, they're using like a bump cap, like a baseball cap, because it's cheaper to replace and to issue. If you go to Scotland, they've never had the custodian helmets. They've always had the flat hats with the black and white, what's called the silly toe tartan going around the edge, if you've got that image in your head there. But no, the different forces have their own different crests.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's very cool. I know over here, I notice in a lot of chiefs' offices, having a bobby helmet or hat is kind of like a thing. Like all the chiefs want to have one of those, so they're kind of prized over here.
Yeah, let's not ask how they get those though, because there's probably rules being broken there.
Oh, I guarantee it. Yeah, actually,
money may change hands. I don't want to ask any more though.
Yeah, my wife's cousin actually is part of the Garda. I think that's the Irish police, right?
That's the Republic of Ireland Police, yeah, the Garda Síochána, yeah, that's correct. And do you know what that actually stands for?
No idea.
The word police doesn't appear in the Republic of Ireland. It actually stands for Guardian of the Peace.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's when the Irish, for their reasons, they declared independence and they decided they wanted a sort of clean break from the British model.
Now, let me ask you something. Question I always wanted to ask is when or who carries guns over there in the police force? Or when will they do that? Or do they have special teams that do that?
Yeah, they're called authorised. We have three types of firearms officer, really. Your ordinary one, for want of a better description, is an authorised firearms officer, an AFO. They're out there patrolling. They work shifts. They will probably go to the same briefings as the unarmed officers at the start of a shift, and they will go to firearms or calls that require special tactics, and they will assist unarmed officers. So, for example, they do a lot of training courses. So they'll assist traffic patrols with pursuits and hard stops. If there's a call goes out on the radio channel that we need what's called method of entry, which is the big red key that unlocks cell doors everywhere, or a lock snapping kit, they're all trained to do that, so they will come and assist with those sorts of taskings.
Does that cause any kind of ripple through in morale? Like some guys are armed, some aren't, but you're doing the same job, kind of, because everybody's out there with their ass in the wind, in the public.
Well, in Scotland, funnily you should say that, they have. You've got to bear in mind they have a devolved government in Scotland, so they don't get all their direction from our Westminster government. But in Scotland, there's an instruction that firearms officers do not go to calls that do not require firearms, because apparently that's not what the public wants up there.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, brother, are you ready to get into a story?
There's just one other thing I would add, actually. There is one other thing I would add, actually, to that question you just asked. In Northern Ireland, it's routine for cops to be armed. It's the norm.
Oh, interesting.
And that's basically because of the history and the political situation over there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would figure London, I mean, that place has been bombed 1,000 times. I figured they would at least armed all the regular metropolitan officers down there, but they're kind of resisting.
Well, they also have a big cadre of AFOs, which is supplemented by two other police forces down. Well, three really. You've got the British Transport Police have firearms units that are routinely helping the local police out in London, and the City of London Police. And now this is where it gets a bit obscure, because the City of London and London are two different things. The City of London is only a square mile, and it has its own police force called the City of London Police. The rest of the Greater London area is policed by the Metropolitan Police.
It's sounding more and more like America. Just way too many agencies.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
It is, but it's because it's funded differently. If you swear in with the City of London Police, you don't swear an oath to the Crown. You swear an oath to the corporation of the City of London. It's almost a private police force in terms of how it's funded, but it's very well funded and very well equipped.
Hey, Steve, I got a couple of questions for Bill. Now that we're on this subject, I don't know if you want to move on or not.
No, go for it.
Bill, just out of curiosity, I'm going to throw all this stuff out there, and then you just answer whatever you want. Knowing that there's been a couple of high-profile incidents in London, and I don't know how far you are from there. Just trying to get your take on it. Where the bridge knifing attack, the concert bombing, and there's been some other incidents. And what's your take, or is there a general take from the British police as far as American policing? What do you guys think about how we police and all our guns and all that kind of stuff? Do you have an opinion on that?
I do. Well, let's see now. We are 17 minutes into the call and we're talking about guns. I had a joke with my friend. I said, I'm doing a podcast interview for an American thing, and I tagged him in it, and he said, I'll have a look at that. And he said, how long do you think it'll be before they start asking you questions about guns? And I said, it won't be long. It will not be long at all. To go back to your question, though. Sorry, go on, please.
Another thing I wanted to add on to that. Is it true that there are drop boxes in London where you can drop off your knives?
They don't do that all the way around the year. They do it when they're having what they call an amnesty. I'll tell you what the press don't tell you about these amnesties. If they're having a knife surrender amnesty or a gun surrender amnesty, we have those as well sometimes, it's usually the start of a campaign where they start targeting people that they've got intelligence about for those kind of crimes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they're giving you the opportunity to be up front, to hand your stuff in, because when your door goes in and they find that you've got stuff or you've been involved in crimes and they're looking for the weapon that was involved, they can sort of do it as an add-on in the prosecution file that, well, we did have an amnesty and he didn't hand it in then, so as you can see, he's, let's say, an organised criminal, or he's somebody that's a habitual criminal that uses these kind of weapons. So I understand why you guys might think it's a bit bonkers, but it's the prelude to a campaign where they're actually using intelligence-led targeting to go after suspects and offenders that they believe have been involved in things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm just curious what kind of knives people are surrendering, because they still have to use kitchen utensils, butcher knives, things like that. So a knife is a knife when you want to hurt somebody, right?
Very true. In this country, to buy a knife, you have to be 18 years old. And we have what's called a Think 25 challenge policy for ID. So if you look under 25, and this is the stores, sometimes they have Think 21, but if you look under 25, they will ask you for ID to prove that you're over 18. Now, I understand to an outsider that might sound a little bit strange, but what they're doing there is they're trying to introduce a sort of a line in the sand, so that if you're doing something in anger, you've got an opportunity to think twice about what you're doing. That said, I have a knife full of a kitchen drawer full of knives. If I somehow went off my head and decided I was going to go out and hurt somebody with it, there's not a lot that's going to stop me from doing that. But going back to what you were saying about firearms, what really annoys me when there's always this debate about should we routinely arm police on the British mainland, there's always comments from people saying no, because we don't want these. And you'll have to forgive me, I'm quoting here, and this may come across as offensive to some of your listeners on that side of the Atlantic, but we don't want the American style of shoot first and ask questions later, the cowboys, the buckaroos. These are all the phrases that you use. What really annoys me is they don't compare us to, let's say, Australia or France or Canada or Germany or Spain. They don't compare us to those routinely armed police forces. They look for an extreme example and then try and say, but we don't want that. And that really frustrates me. Now, I'm kind of on the fence about the whole routine arming debate. There are pros and cons to it. And I think I have an insider's sort of take on looking around and saying, well, yeah, I can see why that would be a good idea in those circumstances, but we have had it where our firearms officers have left their sidearm in the toilet in a public place. We've had it. I mean, there was quite a famous example in the local police force near where I live. Somebody put the sidearm on the roof of a car, drove off, and somebody who lived near the police station found it in the road, and very lucky. Fortunately,
well, that kind of stuff happens on every police force. I mean, that happens over here too.
Yeah, I mean, we have what we call cake offences. So if you do certain things, you have to buy the rest of your shift cakes or some sort of sweet treats as a fine. That I think I think leaving your sidearm on the roof of the car and a member of the public finding it and handing it in at the front desk. That's probably, I think that's a 3-tier wedding cake size penalty.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, they probably take your gun away if that happened, I would think.
Not necessarily at the moment, because let's see now, a prime minister ago wanted to uplift the number of firearms officers in the country, and they were actually desperate because there were people applying. They were putting in for the role, they were putting in for the transfer, but the right kind of people weren't passing the courses, so they were struggling to get the numbers.
That's interesting. It's so so different over there, and over in America too is not. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, look at us, and your media does the same thing our media does, and it takes anecdotal things that happened, and they just stamp you with that, like we're cowboys and we're shooting everybody up and whatever.
No, the media would never do that.
Yeah, no, that's terrible.
Never, no.
But
what media in the world would do that? That's
right.
No chance. No, I'm not having that at all. I'll die a death on your chair before I let you say that. No, they are really. I mean, the thing to remember about the media. They don't report the news; they sell newspapers.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I was just saying, like
sensation.
America's very. It's just I don't know if you've been here, but it's huge, and it's like different countries in different parts of it. Like the southeast is much different than the northwest, and the northeast is much different than the southwest. It could be several different countries, So the all the statistics and shootings and all that stuff varies greatly from all over how gigantic this place is.
Have you heard of a chap called Detective Ken Mead from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police? He had a big hand in the Las Vegas shooting a couple of years ago in terms of investigating. Have you heard of this chap?
I've not.
I've not either.
He does guest speaking through the International Police Association, and I went to see him he was over here. And I was I knew that laws varied from state to state in the US, but I was quite surprised when he told us how much of the stuff the shooter had that was, all of it was completely legal to have, and somebody could go out and buy the same stuff tomorrow and not ring any alarm bells. But I understand what you're saying about how different it is geographically from sort of one end of your country to the other. He used a phrase that stuck in my mind. He said that Nevada was what they consider a frontier state in terms of its attitude to gun control and self-defense and things like that. And I liked that phraseology, the frontier state. It kind of stuck in my head.
Yeah, it's kind of neat the way it is. It's kind of they're kind of like it's kind of like the Wild West there, and then if you go to Massachusetts, it's a lot. You can own firearms there, but even our laws are written back from Old English, so it's like our laws refer to constables and peacekeepers and sheriffs and stuff like you guys, because we got all that from you guys, and they kind of had to retrofit it with police officer and all these other words,
Yeah. Do they still have an offence called breach of the peace then in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of our. We still have that over here today. It's been watered down a lot with case law, but we still have an offence called breach of the peace. I can imagine that you would have inherited some of that terminology and what have you. That the term felon actually does come from Britain.
Really?
Yeah, we got rid of it for some reason. We used to have felons and misdemeanors, but we now, in terms of the offences, I think you still use the phrase felony for a serious offence. We call that an indictable offence now, so it would go to Crown Court rather than a magistrate's court, the local court. And then the alternative to a misdemeanour is a summary offence, which means that you will get a summons to the local court. You don't necessarily have to be arrested and put in front of the court. They'll just tell you when to be there, and you don't turn up, they'll issue a warrant for your arrest. But the felon is it's a British term, and I only learned that recently, just flicking through a history book and finding that out.
Ken, I think I stepped on you a little bit before. You had a question?
Well, I can't remember it. It's not funny anymore, Steve.
No, I remember I didn't really answer the question that you asked me, Ken. To be fair, sorry, I've gone off on a tangent here. But in terms of, does it concern me? Yes, I went to one of those terrorist attacks, and I've bullet pointed one of my answers to your questions is based on that. Do I think that I could get shot? Is probably the question that you're too polite to ask. Yes, I hope it will either hit my ballistic vest or it will be a quick. And I don't want to suffer. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it hurts.
I know that might sound very defeatist, but I've never been shot. I've been assaulted several times, and I go to a martial arts class, so I'm used to getting knocks and bruises and what have you, and getting slammed into the floor. But no, if I'm going to get shot, I just hope it's a quick thing.
The reason I ask is not so much as a debate on firearms or conversation about firearms. Is my take is from the United States to Britain. We hear the different stories, and in the United States, if you hear a news story about there's been a shootout and the cops were in this firefight with bad guys, and cops were killed and bad guys were killed, most of the time it's the bad guys that get killed. But when we hear about stuff that happens in Great Britain, most of the time the news picks up that it's some kind of terrorist attack, which is not super foreign to us. But for the most part, American police officers don't deal with terrorist attacks. But in Great Britain, you've got bombs maybe or things like that. And so we take the debate about firearms. It's a protection thing against the bad guys. And I didn't know how you viewed America versus Great Britain and the different challenges that we have with regard to criminals.
They're the same criminals. It's just that yours have better access to firearms. There are people, we have had police officers shot dead in this country. The prime example that I can think of was a constable called David Rathband, who was shot at close range. Sorry, he didn't die. I do apologise. That's I'm using a poor example here, but he was blinded. He was shot in the face with a shotgun and blinded. But we have had, we've had police officers shot and killed. To be fair, criminals. My big fear is not being shot; it's being run over. It's being mown down with a car, or being hit by a train, because that's pertinent to the police force that I work for. So I always have my head on a swivel, if you know what I mean, in that respect. I really do not want to get mown down by a car. We have a very peculiar policy towards pursuits in most of the police forces over here when it comes to car chases. But it seems to be changing a bit now, because we had a problem in London with criminals on mopeds, on motorbikes. And they've now got this policy, what's called tactical contact, which is basically hit them with the car, knock them off the bike, if you believe that they're dangerous. Oh yeah, I mean, you're laughing, but that's the way it's gone now. That is the way it's gone. But I mean, the whole thing about how we police over here, we police with consent, whereas you guys are law enforcement. And that really comes out of the history of your country. You didn't like what was going on, and you turn around and say, well, we're not happy about this, and armed yourselves. The guy from Las Vegas that I was telling you about, he said, you know where our Second Amendment came from, don't you? And, there was quite a lot of people in the room, and we were like, oh, well, and then somebody at the back said, well, it came from out of the revolution, when you turn the empire out. And I thought, don't you dare say it's our fault. don't you try and blame that on us. But and there was we have like a gallows humour in the police, as I'm sure you do over there. And there was another voice from the back of the room who said, well, you should pay your bloody taxes then. And and somebody else said, don't good tea in the water, and that sort of stuff. No, we were very kind and polite to this chap. We were very grateful for him to come and talk to us about that sort of the horror, really, of what happened in Las Vegas.
Yeah. I kind of have I have like a romantic idea of the Bobbies because the guys over there don't have guns. I always imagine, and I think there's some evidence to back this up, that they're kind of like hard asses. They're tough, They're foot patrol. They got a stick. There's a bar brawl, whatever. They go in, they fight. It's kind of, I don't mind it. I would prefer to have a gun if I'm a sworn police officer, but there's something kind of cool about just a tough guy with a lead-filled stick just kicking ass.
I think once upon a time it used to command a respect. Definitely it used to command a respect, but there isn't the respect now that there used to be. No way. I mean, the thing is, though, you've got to read between the lines. Once upon a time, some of my colleagues who have retired or who are about to retire, when they started, you could probably slap an offender about, and there would be no complaint. No one would film it on a mobile phone. If they raised a hand to you, you could give them a bloody good shoeing. Now you couldn't, you're supposed to get smacked about and then still treat them with kid gloves when it comes to actually restraining and arresting them. So I think, yes, there was once that image, but now I think it's faded.
Bill, you're bursting my bubble.
There used to be a TV show called Dixon of Dock Green. And people always say, like, oh, this is changing now. They're getting, they're going out with tasers, and it's not like the old days, the Dixon of Dock Green style policing. And I always sort of comment on that, and I always say, first of all, Dixon of Dock Green was a TV show; it was fiction. And secondly, what happens to Dixon in the last episode of Dixon of Dock Green? He was shot dead. So what? How are you using that as an example? Where's your context there? You know what I mean?
That's funny.
Yeah, when I started in police work way back when, we used to use the term for if you're going to get in a fight, it was called a Donnybrook. And
a what? Sorry,
a Donnybrook.
Yeah,
a Donnybrook. Right, yeah. I've never heard that one before. That's different.
Well, it comes from Australia, and it just means an uprising, and we use it for fights, but I always knew that was not an American term originally. So, but in America, if you're getting in a fight, you got in a Donnybrook. And so, we took some of your stuff, it was cool.
You guys, Australia, interchangeable.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. We talk the same. Yes. We have the same kangaroo problems.
Put another shrimp on the barbie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad we don't have the weather because I can't stand the heat. But yeah, we're completely interchangeable. In fact, if you put two, an Australian cop and a British cop next to each other, there'd be no difference at all. You would. I actually have a friend who's gone out to Australia. He's gone into Western Australia State Police, and the difference is. They are quite. They do the community policing. They do the same way as what we do. What's left of our community policing, they still do it the same way. But in terms of when things are going wrong and what have you, he said it's totally different the way that we handle situations. It sounds like a bit of an adventure in Western Australia.
I have a friend from England, and he last time he was here, he said, you really ought to try to travel more. I'm like, Tim, you don't understand. This country's huge, and like you can go to 5 countries in a weekend. Over there, you can do some really awesome, you can see 5 different cultures, you can go backpacking, all this stuff, but here it's just not that easy.
No, I understand. I mean, I've got friends who live in the US and through the Martial Arts Association, and every 3 years we have an international gathering. And I went over to Canada a few years ago, and I liked what I saw in Canada. I was very impressed, and I remember sitting down talking to the guys and the girls from the US, and they said, they were saying they said it was like a nice rural community back home is how they described Canada, and I sort of chuckled, and I thought, well, okay, yeah, fair enough if that's how you relate to it. But the people from the US that I meet over here, I would always say, you've got to get out and travel. You can't stay in your own. You can't say that your country's great until you've been to others and seen what's actually going on there. I would always say, and I try and travel as much as I can for that reason, just to see the world and meet people.
Yeah, I'm going to fly around everywhere and then come back here and go, I knew it. This place is the best.
Yeah,
that was for your British fans.
I was going to make a joke.
Don't worry.
For
I mean, it goes back to what I'm saying. Mental ill health is international. I mean, if that's what you want to believe, mate, you crack on.
Oh, Bill, man, we are 40 minutes in here. We've not asked you a single war story question.
This may have to go into
that's all right. No,
another
it's
interview.
Nice to chat. It's almost another interview, isn't it? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Because I want to ask you what it was like when you did police in Australia.
Oh no, I didn't police in Australia. It was a pal of mine.
I know that was a poorly made joke. You have to go. You're supposed to laugh at.
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry. I do apologise. I totally. It totally went over my head there. I'm going to go and flush my head down the toilet and give my life.
You guys are dicks, man. What's wrong with you people?
I got the joke, but with the delay, I know it wouldn't have landed.
It's all the sun and the kangaroos. It upsets us.
Oh man, hey Steve, you did. You think we could throw some questions in there? Because I think Bill's got some stories I'd be interested in hearing about.
I'm ready to go, baby. Bill, tell us about the first thing you responded to that really got your blood going, gave you a little adrenaline dump.
Okay, so my in the police, I'll not use any recollections from. I used to work in the security industry, but I'll not use any of those. But my first blue light call, as we call it, first blue light run. So I think I was second shift. I was working with, I think you call them field training officers over your side of the water. We call them tutors.
Okay.
So I was working with my tutor, and the call came in that a resident whose back garden overlooks the railway line, the main line, so we're talking 125 mile an hour travelling trains on this part of the main line, has seen kids in school uniform. They've climbed over a railway access gate. They're going up the vehicle access for like the engineers, so they can get to the railway lines when they need to do maintenance. And they're picking up stones. You have what's called ballast stones that are on the track, that the rails are on. And the caller believes that they're about to start throwing stones at passing trains. So we get in the car, and my tutor says to me, the sat-nav's broken. So you're going to have to navigate with the A to Z, the map book. A sat-nav is, I think you call them GPSs in the United States, the little device.
That sounds right.
Attached to the dashboard, the mapping device. He said, it's broken. You'll have to use the A to Z. So I'm like, okay, right, fair enough. He chucks it at me, fires up the blues and twos, and we are off. So it says the name of the street, the road. You go in the index, you find the name of the road, and then it gives you a page number and a grid reference. So I find the page number and the grid reference. Bearing in mind, we're turning corners on two wheels, we're screeching away across town here.
Sure.
And I find the right grid, and I'm looking at it, and I can't find this street. And these are only an inch by inch squares. And I'm looking, I'm thinking, where is it? Where is it? So I look in the next square to the right, I look in the square to the left, I look in the 3 squares above, I look in the 3 squares below. And he's saying, right, I know roughly which part of town it is. We're heading that way, but you're going to have to give me some directions now. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I can't find the street. And he said, okay. And he pulls over and turns the lights and the sirens off. And I'm just bright red.
Oh, boy.
And he takes the book out of my hands. He goes to the index at the back of the book, finds the street name, page, grid reference, goes back. But the thing is, his finger is on exactly the same part of the same page that I was looking at. And he said, this is wrong. And he then looks on the next page and he said, they've put the wrong page number in the index. And I was like, whew, that's okay then. I've got away with that then. That was an incredible dodge. Anyway, so we fires up the lights and the sirens again, and I'm navigating him in. We get there, and we have in the British Transport Police on the vehicle keys, we have what's called a number 16 key, and that's a railway industry key, and it opens the padlocks for the line side access gates, so you can get from the public highway onto railway property. So it opens that up, and we're walking up this sort of access lane to go towards the tracks. And I said to him, shouldn't we be calling the railway authority and getting them to slow the trains down because we're line side now? And, bearing in mind, I've not long since finished my training, so we have to do track safety training on top of what the local police forces have to do. It's like a 4-day course, I think. And he said, no, we'll be okay. We'll be fine. Don't worry.
Old salty dog.
James. Oh, yeah, proper salty. I mean, he was an ex-military man. He was an ex-military policeman, and frankly, he knew his stuff. And he, he was definitely the right guy to be a tutor. So we go line side, and a train goes flying past us at definitely over 100 miles an hour. Ooh. Steve, Ken, have you ever been stood within a few feet of a train going past you at over 100 miles an hour?
No.
I've been, the only thing I've had close to that, and it's not that powerful, was the commuter train here in LA. I was out of the car once in one of the neighborhoods, and the train goes 70 to 80, and I was a good distance away from it, and I could feel it. And that stuck in my mind when it happened. I said, wow, there's a lot of force there. But that was they only go like 70.
Yeah, this was definitely doing over 100. It might not have been doing the full 125, but you have to hang on to your hat. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And if you stood close enough, the turbulence will knock you off your feet towards the train. So that was my first blue light call, and I realised right there and then, tutor or not, I don't care. Next time I'm coming line side, I'm ringing the signaller up from the railway authority, and I'm following the safety procedures.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because it is tense when you're on those railway lines and those trains are going past you. It is tense. Anyway, as it turns out, it was area search no trace. We got back in the car, went back to the post, and we'd gone back to the post because my tutor had some paperwork they needed to continue doing, and plus it was one of my first few shifts with him, so he wants to have a chat with you and find out what you like. I mean, I tutor new colleagues now, so I can totally understand what the conversation was about, what he was trying to do, trying to gauge me, that sort of thing. And I then get an email from our station clerk that says, "Oh, Mr. Such and Such at such a place has called up. He saw you after he was the person that called for the police because he saw the kids line side. Oh, and he's called just to say thank you very much for coming out. You missed them by just a few minutes, but he was very impressed by the smartness of your uniforms and how prompt you turned out." I was just sat there laughing, and I thought, this guy has just been staring at us from his back bedroom window. He could have shouted or something and said, "They're gone. You're all right." But anyway, that was my first blue light call. Yeah.
But your uniform looked good. That's important. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. All shiny and brand new straight out of the packet. Yeah. And back then, when I started, we used to wear shirts and clip-on ties. So it would have been, I pride myself, it would have been immaculately ironed. The creases, you could have shaved with the creases. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, as long as you're looking good. If you lose your life, as long as you're looking good, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. Standards, if it's all going wrong, at least you've got your hat on. At least if it's all going wrong.
That's one good-looking dead constable.
That's right.
Indeed, yeah.
Smart. He looks smart, Steve.
Smart. That's right. All right, Bill. Can you tell us about the strangest or most bizarre thing you dealt with?
Yeah, that was, as I'm sure you can imagine, being in the transport police, we go to the railway fatalities, where people have been struck by trains. And we went to one. It wasn't actually our area. It was one of our sub-posts. But it sounded like it was going to be a big job, so we went to assist. Nearly died on the way there on the blue light run. That was certainly interesting. The guy who was driving us, there was me, a sergeant, one of the best sergeants that I ever had. He was an ex-Royal Marine, and he was as tough as old boot leather. One of those sort of proper, like, hard guys, you know what I mean? Who, if it came to an exchange of punches, he was going to win every day of the week. He was one of those sorts of people. Anyway, so we've got the guy who's driving, the sergeant sat next to him, and I'm sat in the back of the van, and the seats face to the rear, and then you've got the prisoner cage that the seats face. So that the idea is that if you've got a prisoner in the cage, somebody can monitor the condition or whatever while you're taking him to either to custody or to the hospital. Anyhow, we're driving up these country lanes, and the traffic just wouldn't get out of the way. There was like a row of these vehicles that just would not pull over or slow down so we could overtake them.
And the country lanes in England are kind of famous for being kind of rickety and dangerous, correct? Narrow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Going above the speed limits are there for a reason on those country lanes, because they are, if you don't know them, they can be death traps. They can be pretty intense flying around the corners, particularly if it's blind corners and you don't know. I mean, if you're doing 60 miles an hour up a country lane and then a tractor suddenly appears out of a gate, that's pretty tense. But we're driving up this country lane and this traffic just wouldn't get out of the way. Anyway, he manages to overtake a couple of cars, and then there's what's called a skip lorry. So it's a truck that transports. Do you know what I mean when I say skip? Does that make sense to you?
I don't know.
It's like it's larger than a bin, than a rubbish bin.
A lorry's a truck, right?
A lorry is a truck. That's correct. Yes, sorry, I've got to get the vernacular right here.
No,
but a skip is like it's like for builders' rubble. So you have them on building sites, and a lorry comes, drops it off.
Like a dumpster.
A dumpster, yeah. It's like an open top dumpster.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's the word I was looking for, and I couldn't quite get it right in my head. So this skip lorry, we managed to overtake it, and the guy who's driving says, "Bloody hell! Why didn't he stop? Why didn't he stop? I'll make him stop." And then he slams the brake on, and this lorry, he slams his brake on. I'm sat in the back facing this lorry as its wheels lock, and it skids towards us. And I'm going, Jesus Christ, Chris, what the hell are you doing? This lorry is coming at me. And I was like, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I'm almost opening the door and diving out. You know what I mean? It was pretty, it was close, let's put it that way. And then he just puts his foot down and takes off like nothing had happened. Now, the sergeant, the ex-Royal Marine, he's laughing his head off. He thinks it's hilarious. I'm sat in the back checking my pants thinking, Jesus, am I all right? I'm sort of like patting myself to that. Yeah, I've got my arms are here, my legs are there. I've still got my shoes on. I've still got my hat. Got to have your hat. Don't worry about that. Anyway, we get up to this remote place where the access is for the lines, for the railway lines. And the local police are there. Some of the more remote places, the local police tend to beat us to these places. One of the things I will say, though, is that the local police forces, there's only one that I'm aware of that does track safety training. So you could probably imagine these local cops, they are walking all over the railway lines. They don't know if a stop's been put on the trains. This is a 125 mile an hour section of the railway lines as well. So we're sort of politely, as we're walking up, saying, "Can you just get off? Yeah, go and stand over there. Yeah, get out of the way." Anyway, we find the impact point, and my colleague from the sub-post where this actually was, the geographical area, he's already got the body bag out. We have in the back of our vehicles 2 big orange rucksacks, and they're like medics' rucksacks. And one will be a heavy-duty first aid kit, and the other is the fatality kit. So he's got that open, and he's unpacking things. He's putting what we call gauntlet gloves on, which are like very heavy-duty rubber gloves that go up to your elbow.
Sure.
And he's sort of saying, right, we need to find out what the classification is. We need a first account off the driver, and give me the nod, and then I'll start picking the body parts up. So we carry on walking, and the impact point to the train was about, I'd say about 3/4 of a mile before the train had managed to stop.
Oof.
Probably a little bit more than that. It was no more than a mile. So, we're yomping up the tracks to get up to the train, and we get up there, and there's a cluster of the local police, and the train driver's got the door open, and he's sort of sat there with his head in his hands, as I'm sure you can imagine the effect that something like this will have on the train driver. And we make it, they have in-cab radio phones now. It's only very recently we've got them, so we make him ring our control room to give a first account to the control room so they can get it on the log, and the senior officer can look through it and decide, is this an explained fatality, an unexplained fatality? Are there any suspicious circumstances, or is it an industrial accident? That sort of classification process. Anyway, we go and we have a look at the front of the train, and on the front of the train, there's this like rectangular panel. You open this panel and it slides inwards, and you can get what's called the coupling out, and that's to hook two trains together.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So this coupling panel, a corner of it is broken off, and there's claret splattered on the front of it. There's blood splattered on the front of it. Mm. So my colleague, the sergeant, we've got other colleagues who are already picking up the body parts further back down the track, putting them in the body bag. My colleague, the sergeant, opens it up, and he looks in and he says, "Here, look at this." And all these intestines were wrapped around the coupling. So I said, right, I'll go and get us some gauntlet gloves. I'll go and get us a bag. So what I did is I went and got a large evidence bag, clear plastic evidence bag that has but it's got handles. So I go and get this bag. I get an opaque brown paper bag and another one of these clear plastic evidence bags with the handles. So we go up to the front of the back. I go back to the front of the train, and we put the gauntlet gloves on, and he's pulling the intestines out of this coupling housing, and he's passing them to me, and I'm just gently putting them in the bag, like winding them round just so it goes in the bag, and I'm trying not to get blood on the outside.
Oh my gosh! Is it like slippery, like kind of like grabbing an eel or something?
Oh yeah, it is, and they were still quite warm. You could feel through the rubber of the glove.
So I've been told before, Bill, that
the magician.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead,
please. No. Ask your question by all means.
I was going to say I've never been to a train crash before, human versus train, but Ken has told me before that does the person just explode? I mean, that's basically what happens, right?
It can do, yes. I mean, some of them they bounce off and they're quite intact. But no, this one was for want of a better description, an exploder. There were parts all over the place.
Man, and you were about to describe a magician pulling ribbons out of his sleeves.
Yes, that never. When it just goes on and on and on and on. So we're pulling the intestine out.
Oh,
it just
gross!
Keeps going on and on and on. And I'm looking at the sergeant. The sergeant keeps glancing at me, and we're both mouthing at each other. What the? And it just keeps going on and on. and I'm looking at this bag, and I'm thinking, we're going to fill this bag here. Where am I going to get a bigger bag than this? I'm going to have to get another body bag and put it in. Anyway, we keep pulling it, and it's just going on and on. And then it sort of snags. And it gives it a little yank and a tug, but it's not coming out. Mm. And then he sort of like two-handed pulls, and again, it just stretched and then sort of snapped back a bit, and it wasn't coming out. So I said, "Here, get hold of this." So we both get hold, and he said, "Right, we pull on 3. 1, 2. We pull out the end of this intestine. It falls onto the tracks, and wrapped around the end of the intestine was a perfectly intact set of kidneys."
Oh my God!
Wow.
That's
I have never eaten steak and kidney pie since. Honestly, I have never eaten it since. I can't look at kidneys in a butcher's shop window. It's something that you remember. And we bag all this stuff up. I put it in, we get it in the clear plastic bag. We put it in the brown opaque bag, which doesn't have handles, and then put it in another clear plastic evidence bag that does have handles, because we've now got to walk up the side of the train to get to the body bag where the bulk of the stuff is being assembled. We're walking past all the windows of the train, you see, so we don't want passengers to see this clear plastic bag of guts with a set of kidneys on the top. It's probably distressing enough for people on the train as it is. Anyway, we get to the what you do is when you have like one of these sort of exploder type fatalities, you then open, you put everything in the body bag, and then you do an inventory. Right, have we got a head? Have we got 2 arms? Have we got the hands? Have we got 2 legs? Have we got, do we have most of the parts, or do we need to keep looking? Anyway, we're looking, and somebody says, "We're missing a foot." I said, "We're missing a foot?" I said, a foot of what? And he went, no, don't mess around. No, we're missing a foot. I said, okay, right. So we're looking around in the grass and, there's birds coming, assembling in the trees nearby. And it's not uncommon for you to look up and find a fox running off with a big piece of flesh or something like that. So we're looking around. Anyway, we can't find it. And I said, well, it wasn't in the coupling housing, so we'd better have a look underneath the train. Because sometimes a body part will bounce around under the train after the impact, and it will actually come to rest on like a nook or a cranny underneath the train. So this train is about, I can't remember if it was 9 or 11 carriages long, but it was a big old train. Anyway, we about the 5th carriage that we looked underneath from the back walking towards the front, we found the foot, and it was wedged between the wheel of the train and the railhead. And it was wedged good and proper. And we all sort of come up to it, and I think there's about 5 of us. And we couldn't get this foot from this train. And we're all taking it in turns to try and pull this foot free from between the wheel and the railhead. Now, I'd had my turn, and, we're talking gallows humour here, and I am not trying to be offensive to anybody. And when the sergeant went to have a go at pulling this foot, I sort of stood behind at the back and I said, and whoever shall pull the sword from the stone shall be king of all the Britons. Well, we are rolling around. It was inappropriate humour, but it just broke the tension.
That's how you cope. That's the coping, yeah.
It's a coping mechanism. You're absolutely correct, yes. Anyway, in the end, we actually had to ask the driver of the train to move the train forward a few inches so that we could get this foot and then go and add it to the body bag. And that was, in terms of most bizarre call, that was definitely a 9.0 on the weirdometer. And the thing is, after I go to a railway fatality, I always have this intense hunger. I am absolutely starving. I have to go and eat somewhere. I'm talking proper stomach growling, really drained of energy. And apparently there's a bit of science to this. It's because your body has burnt all your energy reserves dealing with a sort of situation, because you've been back and forth. And you've got to bear in mind, we get all this stuff in the body bag, and we've then got to carry it.
You're burning calories big time.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's not an intact body. So things are shifting around in the bag, and you're having to wobble to sort of, prop it up again and carry your end. And we had to get that. I mean, we had to lift that body bag over a dry stone wall, carry it across a field, and then get it over another dry stone wall where the undertaker's van was. What we call them undertakers. I think you might call them funeral directors.
Yeah.
Right,
coroners, funeral directors.
You would probably have you see, we have it slightly different for us because it's unusual for the coroner to come out to a fatality unless there are suspicious circumstances. So coroners don't handle the body. They're not doctors. We do have what you would probably term a medical examiner. We call them a pathologist. Mm-hmm. That's like the scientific name for them, or the medical name for them. But yeah, it would be funeral directors. They would come in a blacked out ambulance, and they would transport the body to the morgue at the hospital for the medical stuff.
So Bill, is the guy that pulled the foot out, is he still the king?
Is he ruling?
Well, nobody managed to do it. We had to move the train. It was just casually scooped up.
The engineer then.
So no crowns handed that day. But after we left that, I said to the guys, I said, I'm starving. We've got to go somewhere. So we went to KFC, and I absolutely smashed two box meals. I really overate.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have been starving after that, Bill. That's
Well, funnily enough, my colleagues who were with me, they were like, "No, we're fine, thanks. Just get us a couple of coffees." And I said, "Right, okay, yeah." And I'm sat in the back of the van on the drive back down the motorway, back to our post, just absolutely filling my face with chicken and chips, and But that's it. I get really, really hungry. I have this craving for food after I've been handling dead body parts.
Oh yeah. Hey, Steve.
Yes.
I predict that this is probably one of the most disturbing interviews you've ever done, and yet will be the most popular to date.
That could be true.
I believe so.
People like to hear when people don't pull the punches. And that's, I mean, hey, it's the truth. It's what he had to deal with. It just, it doesn't matter where you're a cop. I mean, whether you're a police, special constable, special constable, when you sign up for that, you're gonna see the worst.
I like Bill. He's got my popcorn out and my soda. I'm going, what's next? This is good.
Well, I've just been thinking that have I got time to go and put the kettle on and carry on with the interview? But no, I'm going to power through it. I'm going to power through it.
He spins a good yarn, and I think some genetically Americans are predisposed to just to be in awe of people when they have a British accent. I just feel like he is a doctor and we are students.
That's right.
Oh, I'm definitely not a doctor, believe me. I've just about banged 2 brain cells together to turn the shower on the right temperature in the morning.
Oh, this is good stuff. I'm enjoying it. I'm just sitting here like, this is so good, man.
I love it. I love I just love getting the inside of another country too. I'm picturing like where the train could do 125 miles an hour. It's probably more rural there. You're climbing over stone walls with body parts that are awkward. I love the whole imagery of it.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that, you know, you can tell your non-police friends in the pub, and they just sit there, the jaws just hit the table. You know, they're like, and you have to do that, and you did what? And you know, I said, yeah, there's no magic department that you call to come out and pick the body parts up. It's the police. Yeah, it's the railway police that have to do it.
It was the same thing where, and just recently they've come out with these crime scene cleanup crews. But before, when you used to go to a crime scene, there'd be stuff, you know, wherever in blood, guts, whatever in a crime scene, and then we just lock the door and leave, and the coroner would leave, and then nobody thought twice about, hey, who's going to clean this up? Nobody even thought about it. So,
not our problem.
So, can you imagine, you know, if let's say it's a house that's owned, and there's going to be an inheritance in a will. You know, if nobody goes and checks to clean that up, can you imagine, you know, if they left it a month, say, can you imagine the smell when they open that door?
Yeah. Oh, they'd have to tear it down to the frame.
In the face as you know.
Somebody cleans it up. We don't know who it is, but they're out there.
We have those companies in Britain as well that you know that they do clean up sort of industrial problem dirt, you know, and biological fluids, stuff like that. We do have those companies in Britain as well. Yeah, I imagine they're just naming a price. I can't imagine there's much haggling goes on when it comes to quoting the work.
Steve, you know what I thought was interesting, because anybody who's ridden a commuter train back and forth, when I was riding for about 3 years on the Metro link from Los Angeles to Riverside County, I think our train hit people a couple of times, and not maybe the train ahead of us or something like that. But anyways, the cleanup, it seemed like an hour later we were back on the road and the train was moving, everybody's going, and I thought it was kind of quick.
There's probably a target time for non-suspicious fatalities like we have over here then. So we want, if it's been declared non-suspicious, or when it's been declared non-suspicious, they want the body parts picking up, and they want to hand the lines back to the railway within 90 minutes.
That sounds right. That sounds similar.
The thing is, it's costing the railway company money. It's costing the economy money. You know, it's national infrastructure.
So do they just like pick up all the body parts and then someone comes and hoses it down, or what?
Yeah, they do have the Network Rail is the railway authority. It's a public-owned company. They do have a maintenance team that will come out and treat sort of the blood-stained thing, but they don't come like within a day. They will wait. They'll do it overnight when the timetable's quiet and they have a chance to do engineering work. But if it's a level crossing, so if it's where the road meets the railway, the railway authority will pay the local fire brigade to come out and hose it down, just so they can reopen the road and the crossing again. Probably
the local dogs and wildcats help with cleanup.
Oh yeah, I mean we've had it before where fatalities happened at night, and then people have called up after dawn and said, look, my kids have opened the curtains this morning and we can see flesh on the railway lines over the garden fence. We've gone back to pick bits up, and it's not uncommon for the crows to be flying down and scooping up little bits of flesh. Or like you say, dogs, cats, foxes. All the wildlife comes out to have a feast if the opportunity's there.
Bill, Can you tell us about the most intense or terrifying thing that you responded to?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I responded to the Manchester Arena terrorist attack. What a lot of people don't know is that the Manchester Arena is actually attached to Manchester Victoria Railway Station, and they pay a peppercorn sort of freehold rent for the land off the railway, and because of that, it comes under our jurisdiction. So I remember the evening quite well. It's not something you're going to forget. I paraded on that night, that evening, and I was partnered up with a new colleague, and she had transferred over from a different division. She wasn't new to the job, she was just from a different area. And I said, right, so what have you got on tonight? What's the crack? And she said, right, I need to go over to such and such a town, and I need to go and see a victim of a robbery. Go and take a statement from him, get his victim statement. And I said, all right, what's the address? Because I know that town very well. And she said, oh, it's such and such a street. And I said, all right, okay, well, I'll come with you then. She said, you don't have to, it doesn't need two of us to take the statement. And I said, no, that area of town, I will sit in the car and make sure it doesn't get bricked while you're inside the house taking the statement. Oh, right, okay then, yeah, sure. So we drive over, it's about a 40-minute drive. She goes in the house to take the statement with the paperwork. I'm sat in the car. Sure enough, this is an area. It's a pretty rough part of town. We're not talking curtain twitchers here. People come out of their house and they will stare at you. What are the police doing here? What's going on? What's going on? And then sort of kids come up to the car, so you wind the window down and, can I put the sirens on? Well, no, you can't put the sirens on because people are trying to watch telly and they're eating the dinner and they don't want to be disturbed. You can put the lights on. I'll let you put the lights on. So you lift a kid up and you pull them through the window and say, press that button there, and you put the lights on. And then you pick the next one up and they turn the lights off, and you pick the next one up and you say, if you press this button here, run around the back of the car and see what the lights are doing now. And anyway, we're doing all that sort of jazz. And my colleague has finished the statement. She comes out of the house. She's walking up to the car, and I said, okay, guys, we've got to go now. Bye-bye. Really nice to meet you. And they're saying, oh, nice to meet you, Officer Bill. Bye, bye-bye, and all this sort of thing. And I'm thinking, oh, great, +1 for community relations there. And as my colleague is just about to open the back of the car to put her paperwork in before she gets in the front, a message comes over the radio. And we have big geographic areas in my force. And we were on the same channel as Manchester. And a message comes over from one of my colleagues, and she just says, there's been a loud bang at Manchester Victoria Station. There's screaming. I don't know what's going on. That was it. That's all she said. Now, in a railway station, that could be a car's backfired outside. That could be a display stand has fallen over, and the echo, it sounds like a loud bang, or it has happened before where a glass panel in the roof canopy has come out and smashed on the floor, and that sounds like an explosion. But then a pal of mine who works up at Manchester, he came on, and his communication, his radio drill was absolutely brilliant. He said there has been an explosion in the City Rooms area that links Manchester Arena to Manchester Victoria Railway Station. There are several casualties. There have been fatalities. We have panic. I believe it's a bomb because there are nuts and bolts everywhere. His communication was absolutely on point. And I said, we're going, yeah? We just fired up the blues and twos and we flew away. Now, normally it would be, I would say it would take you an hour to drive at normal speed to Manchester Victoria Railway Station. We were doing I didn't even know you could get 140 mile an hour out of a Ford Focus. We were doing, we were blasting down the motorway, and another vehicle from our post, just as we joined the motorway, they were coming down. So we were in front of them. So we're sort of traveling in a two vehicle convoy. And I said to my colleague, bearing in mind she's concentrating on her driving, I don't want to distract her. I said, what is on at the arena tonight? She said, I don't know. So I'm firing up Google on my phone, like Manchester Arena event sort of thing, and I'm looking at it, and I said, "What's an Ariana Grande because I didn't know what Ariana Grande was.
Sounds like a Starbucks drink.
Say again?
Sounds like a Starbucks drink.
It does actually. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'll have a tall Ariana Grande, please. And my colleague said I have no idea. So we're doing about 130, 140 miles an hour on the motorway, and I'm playing Ariana Grande songs on YouTube on my phone because I'm just curious to know what Ariana Grande was.
Sure.
So we're blasting down the motorway at 140 miles an hour, and this pop music's coming out of my phone. And I think I've like a minute of one song, 2 minutes of another, a minute of another, and I went, right, okay, that's enough of that crap, and switched it off. And the thing is, I put the postcode in, or what you would call the zip code in, into the sat nav, the GPS mapping device.
Do you guys use Google Maps over there on your phones at all?
We do now. They now give us job mobile phones, and we use the mapping on that now. But at first they gave us the phones, but no cradles to put them in the vehicles, to clip them in. And they weren't going to do that at first. It was really bizarre because they said if you're using that phone while you're driving, that class is you're breaking the law and blah, 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 blah. And we said, look, we're adults. Why don't you trust us?
Sure.
So when they did send us the cradles, they also sent us these little stickers that we had to stick on the dashboard that says it is illegal to use a mobile phone whilst driving the vehicle. Honestly, the most patronising
holy cow
thing you can imagine. And it was like, yeah.
Well, you guys are never getting guns then.
Guns? We're not getting guns anytime soon. They're not, every time there's a new bit of kit out, I'm sure it's a challenge amongst police officers, right, who can break this first? It just seems to be that we can't be trusted with anything. We're not getting guns. No. I mean, like I say, we have got firearms officers.
Sure, no, I know. I'm just being a douche.
But the cradles that we eventually got with the sticker, that's standard. That the most patronising briefing that you can imagine came with it as well. But yeah, so we're going now. But the thing is, the blue dot on the mapping on the sat nav, it's not designed to keep up with 130 or 140 miles an hour. Our speed limit on our motorway is 70. So the blue dot is actually not catching up with where we are. And we actually missed the junction that we should have turned off the motorway. And then it caught up and I went, oh no, we should have gone off at that last junction there. So my colleague went, right, okay. But the vehicle behind us that we were in convoy with, they're just following us. So if there'd been a sort of observer looking from above, you'll see these two police vehicles doing blues and twos down the motorway, overshoot junction A, come off at junction B, fly round the roundabouts almost on two wheels, taking the corners, come back on the motorway at junction B, and then come off at junction A where it should have been in the first place. So already it wasn't going very well. But we get to Manchester Victoria Railway Station and there's pandemonium. There's people walking around bleeding and crying and screaming. And I don't remember there being any ambulances there when we got there. It took us, what should be an hour's drive, it took us about 40 minutes to do it. I was quite impressed with my colleagues' driving skills. Considering I hadn't worked with it before, I was very impressed with their driving skills. And there were no ambulances there. The only ambulance staff that were there were medics, private medics for the event, but the only ambulance staff that were there were what we have something called community first responders, and they volunteer with the ambulance service. They're
so,
not blue light
Bill,
trains.
let me ask you,
Yeah.
how could there be 40 minutes that passed by and no ambulances?
Because nobody had told the ambulance service it was safe for them to attend yet.
Oh, okay.
They were in a rendezvous point. This is all going to come out in the coroner's hearing next year, but it's no secret. Messages weren't passed that should have been passed. I think I'm going to get on my soapbox here. The biggest mistake we made was handing over command to the local police. That was, I think, the weak link in the chain. But it will all come out in the coroner's hearing next year, all that sort of stuff. So we get in there, and there was 3 community first responders. These volunteers, and they're not paramedics, they're not EMTs. They use their own cars. What they do is they look after their own local area, so they can get somewhere, particularly rural areas. If they can get there before an ambulance can come from a town, they can keep somebody alive until the ambulance arrives. So they've got defibrillators, they've got oxygen mask cylinders, that sort of thing. Am I giving you painting a picture of what kind of skill set they've got?
Absolutely.
So there's 3 of these community first responders there. There was a Jewish guy wearing a yarmulke cap. There was a Muslim guy wearing a Muslim prayer cap. And there was a great big jolly Irishman with a great big beard. I'll always remember the 3 of them. And I remember thinking afterwards, it does sound like the start of a joke, a Jew, a Muslim, and an Irishman.
Sure.
Go to a major incident with the medical kit. And I realised then, it was just a flicker, that whatever this is, whatever, it's going to be terrorism, but whatever the motivation is here to try and wreck our way of life, already it's failing. Because you've got these 3 people from these communities working together in a triage area that's been a makeshift triage area, saving life. So this might sound a bit, I don't know, sentimentalist or romantic, but that put a bit of wind in my sails, that did. That gave me a boost, right, let's get on with the job.
Absolutely.
So we go in, and there's a lot of people that were just stood there sort of overwhelmed by what was going on, couldn't process it. Members of the public, railway staff, they were sort of in awe at what was going on. And one of the annoying things was how fast we ran out of first aid material.
I bet. There was.
I remember speaking to a colleague.
Just so people know, Bill, this was after an Ariana Grande concert, and the rail station is partially underneath the arena. Is that correct? It's
attached. Yes, that's right. So the arena is on railway property, and you can go straight from the arena into the railway station from they're not turnstiles as such, but the entrances to the arena. Yeah, there's a lot of people, overwhelmed by what's going on, but one of the things that impressed me is how businesslike my colleagues were. They were just getting on with it, and we'd ran out of first aid materials, and the same colleague that made the very clear radio broadcast to tell us what was going on, 30, 40 minutes earlier, he had said while we were on the way, bring all the first aid kit you can. We're running out left, right and centre. And I remember talking to a colleague weeks, probably months after the event, and she had said to the private medical contractors, bring every stretcher and wheelchair that you've got now. Go and get it from wherever and bring it here because we need it for casualty evacuation. What stretchers? What wheelchairs? And it shocked me to learn that an event that can have a venue for thousands of people that has a medical team, and no one has ever thought before this, we should have stretchers for the first aid room. We should have wheelchairs to convey non-ambulance casualties.
Wow.
It really, really annoyed me that we had to go and get the railway staff to go and get, because you can, in Britain, if you're going from a staffed railway station, if you're elderly or infirmed, you can book passenger assistance ahead. So the railway staff will meet you at the entrance with a wheelchair or with a luggage trolley, whatever you need. So they have their own wheelchairs. So we had to go and get them to bring, let's say they had 5 wheelchairs. It's a big railway station. But, they came in handy. But yeah, it was all very businesslike. And I remember going up to the blast area. It's a part called the City Rooms. And colleagues had come from all over the north there from my force. And they were using portable crowd barriers, metal crowd barriers, flipping them on their side, ripping laminated card advertising boards off the walls and the fittings, chucking them on the bars of the crowd barriers, and just putting casualties on those, picking up the barriers and carting them out. It's a proper belt and braces job of getting these casualties out of there. And some of my colleagues, this will probably, put a positive light to this story as well. I mean, there's quite a bit more I'm going to tell you here, but some of my colleagues that arrived from another post, they came in through a service entrance into the arena to try and get through to the City Rooms area. And as they were running through this corridor, firearms officers from the local police were sort of, 10 steps ahead. And when they heard my colleagues coming up behind, they spun round and actually drew and aimed at one of my pals and our duty inspector, like our senior officer on shift. And they were like, whoa, no, don't shoot. We're from the transport police. Oh, right, okay. my mate, who had the gun pointed out, he's actually an ex-firearms officer. And he said that one of them, he was convinced had a bit of a twitchy finger, and he said it was a good job. He said if we just opened our mouths a second later, he said we'd have possibly got shot at.
So this is a scene of chaos,
sorry,
obviously.
Oh, it was tense. There was a lot of screaming and crying, and people are dying. You know, there were people crying. They were in their last. There were a lot of people that were having their last moments. A lot of people, their relatives, they wouldn't leave them. I remember one of my colleagues, who one of his skill sets, he's what's called a family liaison officer. So if there's been like a murder or a major incident, his job is to bridge between the relatives of a deceased or somebody who's in hospital fighting for their life and the police. He goes and he essentially embeds within that family throughout the investigation process, if you know what I'm sort of saying. Anyway, this family liaison officer, he was stood with this guy, and this guy was stood over his child who was dead. And the guy was sort of saying, is it okay if I stay for a bit? And he said, yeah. He says, for as long as this is a medical situation, not a crime scene, he says, you can stay. And he stood there and he comforted that guy who was stood over his dead child quite a bit.
Hey, Bill, how many people are we talking about at this event?
Thousands. I would say probably, I think maybe 8,000 that would have been there. Maybe, I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many, but there were a lot of casualties. It was a mass casualty incident, and what happens in those incidents is there'll be an advanced paramedic for the ambulance service will come in and start doing triage, and he will have a bag full of coloured tags. And what they do with these coloured tags, green means walking wounded or can make their own way to hospital if need be. Amber means that they need some sort of medical attention. They're going to need an ambulance ride to hospital. Red is critical. Red means that they need stabilising now before the ambulance goes to keep them alive for the journey to the hospital. But they also have a black tag, and that says on it dead. And you put that on somebody who is dead or who is not expected to survive the journey to the hospital. So that those who are, it's triage. We're talking triage here. It's so that essentially, it's a very cold way of putting it, so that you don't waste your time. You concentrate on the ones you can save. That's what I'm saying to you here.
Oh yeah, you gotta make decisions like that. Bill, I can't imagine responding to this. The chaos, the shrieks, the screaming, the body parts, then the fear in your mind. I mean, are you thinking, okay, well, this is clearly a terrorist attack. I've heard about this growing up. It happens in England, London. But could there be a secondary attack for the public safety guys that respond?
Yeah,
I
will come on to that in just a moment, because it changed the shape of. That's why we handed over command to the local police. One of these casualties had this dead tag on, and he woke up, and he started he was trying to get up and falling down. He couldn't. Let's just say he wasn't intact enough to stand on his feet, and he saw the tag and started screaming. And one of my colleagues had casevac'd somebody and gone back into the blast area and saw this guy screaming and shrieking, and he's gone up to him and said, "You're okay, mate? Everything all right?" And he's pointing at this dead tag, and he's trying to pull it off, and he's freaking out, and he actually starts attacking my colleague. He was so panic struck, and my colleague had to sort of push him on the floor, and he sort of he didn't slap him, but he probably shook him about a bit and said, "Listen, you're going to live, but you're going to have to do exactly what I tell you." And that calmed the guy down. And he, went, got him stabilised, got him on a stretcher, got him to the casualty triage area. And what a lot of people don't know, and again, it will come out next year, is that it was about 2.5 hours after the bomb blast before the last casualty was evacuated.
Wow.
That's a long time. that's a long time to be with somebody who's dying, or who's convinced they're going to die. And my colleagues, and I'm not blowing our trumpet here, but my colleagues from the transport police did a damn fine job that night. They really did a damn fine job. We have some pretty good first aid training, advanced first aid training, because of the nature of the injuries that people can get on railways sometimes. And we have good major incident training, both theoretical training, and we do major incident joint working exercises, and we have like e-learning, and we also have something that we call Hydra, which is an immersive learning process. But so what actually, one of the things that that made it worse was that people came forward and gave first accounts and said, I saw what happened. Now, with hindsight, my first question would have been, if you were there and saw what happened, where were your injuries? However, 2 people came forward and gave contradictory first accounts of what had happened. One said, I saw a guy being thrown out of the venue by the security staff. He was being restrained by the security staff. And he took a rucksack off, dumped it on the floor, shouted something, ran off, and then there was a loud bang. Then somebody else said, I saw what happened. I saw a guy come in off the street with a box, put it down in the middle of the concourse when it got crowded as people were leaving the venue, ran off, and then there was a loud bang. Neither of those things are what happened. It was just complete horseshit. These 2 people just walked in off the street and just made up first accounts of what happened.
Helpful.
But you see, the thing is, this now affects the decision-making process. Because when an incident like this happens, things that people walk past and wouldn't think twice about, they are now picking up the phone, dialing 999, and they are saying, there's a suspicious package, there's a suspicious person, I've seen this, I've seen that. And the thing is, the calls that were coming into the local police, coupled with these first accounts, we now thought there is a marauding terrorist attack in progress on Manchester city centre. So command has been handed over to the local police. The local police force is also the regional counter-terrorism unit. They have the regional counter-terrorism unit within that force. Everything, logically, we should have handed over to them. But I have my own reservations about that. So we are now thinking about Mumbai. Are you familiar with the Mumbai terrorist attack?
At the hotel?
Well, it was a hotel, it was a railway station, it was a hospital.
Yeah, there was a very good movie about that I just watched last month, I think.
Oh, there's a movie, right. I'll have to have a look at that. I'll have to look for that. Do you know what the title is?
I thought it might have been Hotel Mumbai, but I can't remember. But the real focus was on the hotel. That was intense.
Well, is that the hotel that they barricaded themselves in and they had to be sort of blasted out? I see, yeah. Well, we had briefings about Mumbai for quite some time before this happened, and we called them marauding terrorist attacks, and we were thinking, right, okay, is somebody going to come round now and pull a gun out and shoot us while we're working on the casualties? So there was a lot of that in the back of your mind. So the firearms officers are there to basically stand guard in key positions so that if somebody does pull a gun out, they can instantly engage and drop them, for want of a better description, to incapacitate the offender and save more life if need be. So there was a lot of that going on in the back of your mind about what was going on. And one of the things after when the news reports and what have you, there was this the local media, the national media were reporting about this hero tramp. Do you know what a tramp is? I don't want to, like a down and out, somebody who lives on the streets.
Oh yeah. Like Lady in the Tramp.
We call them tramps in Britain. And this tramp that had come in after they heard this bang and walked into the railway station where the casualty treatment triage area had been set up. And he'd helped all these people, he'd comforted these dying people, and all this sort of stuff. And I remember thinking, I was there for quite some time and I don't ever remember seeing this guy. And he was being praised in the media, and there was a fundraising effort for him, and people were donating. Thousands of pounds were raised for this guy, for this hero that had done all these great things at this terrorist attack. And then people started to look into it, and it turns out that he had been dipping the pockets of the dead and the dying and stealing
brutal
phones, wallets, watches, jewellery.
Wow.
Yeah, and people had been praising him as a hero and all this sort of stuff. And yeah, he'd been stealing from the dead and the dying.
Well, to be fair, he is a tramp.
He's a tramp.
Well, I don't want to typecast all homeless people, because I'm quite a sympathetic person to some homeless people. And I will tell you something a little bit later about a positive story that I've got involving a guy who was homeless. But yeah, that was the event. And I know that one of your last podcasts, there was a guy on talking about a shooting involving officers and the trauma sort of aftercare that they offer in some police forces over there. He gave it a name and I can't remember what it was, but we have something that some of the police forces over here called TRIM, Traumatic Risk Incident Management. And after you go to like a fatality or a sudden death or a major incident like this, they do like TRIM screenings to find out who needs counselling, who's not fit to be on duty for a while.
Sure.
To sort of gauge how they are and what they are. That night, I think it was the best part of the 16-hour shift. Is what we did before we got back to our home post. And I'll always remember when we got back, we went into the office, and my colleague got back before us because we had to stop off and refuel the car. And one of my colleagues, the one who'd been comforting the guy who had the dead tag, he had chucked his vest, his carry vest, not his ballistic vest, but the vest that he wears over with all the pockets and where you can attach things. He chucked that on the back of a chair in our mess room with the dead tag hanging off it. And me and my colleague, we looked at each other, we're looking at this tag and we're looking at each other. And we thought, oh my God, where is he? So we actually looked around our police post, every room, just to make sure he wasn't there, if you know what I mean. We were quite worried for him. But as it was, it transpired that, he hadn't hurt himself or anything like that. He just chucked his stuff down. I mean, I'll always remember, I had the smell of all the explosive that was used was called TATP. Can I just warn you now, anybody that's listening, if you were to Google search TATP recipe or anything like that and have that in your internet search history, if you were ever being investigated for something and they found that, you would be asked questions. Just so you know, I don't know, different jurisdictions, but it's called TATP, this chemical formula that it used. And I had this smell like in my hair and on my clothes, and it was just awful. So I chucked all my uniform on the floor, went and had a shower, then got into my clothes, and I started making my way home. And there's a cafe around the corner from where I live that I sometimes go in. I can pick up a sandwich on the way to work or a soup, that sort of thing. And they don't open until 7 o'clock in the morning. And this was about 6 o'clock in the morning. And as I was going past, I noticed that the shutters were up and some of the lights were on. So the person that runs the cafe was in there getting set up for the day. And I decided to knock on. And I said, and waved to her through the window. And she came over and she said, "Hiya, you all right? How's it going?" I said, "Is there any chance I could get something to eat? I am absolutely starving." "Yeah, of course. Come in, sit down. What can I get you?" And I said, "I could just go for a bacon and scrambled egg butty. I could just have a bacon and scrambled egg sandwich." And she said, "Yeah, no problem." And she had the radio on, and inevitably the news came on. And she said, "Oh, that's terrible, isn't it? All those, a concert like that." And I just looked up and I said, "Yeah, those poor children." And I just looked back down and concentrated on my sandwich. And I think she realised, because she knows what job I do, I think she kind of realised that, hang on a minute, there's something, I've touched a nerve here. And I ate my food, paid for it, and just went home. And I remember I went, had another shower because I still felt like I smelt of the sort of chemicals that had been in the air. And I went to bed and I was out like a light. I was so exhausted, I just fell asleep straight away.
I bet.
It was, I was just drained.
And this was a suicide bomber, right?
That's correct, yes. It was a suicide bomber. He'd made a vest of explosives. He'd walked through the city rooms area once, around about the time the concert was due to finish. Walked through it, thought it wasn't busy enough, I presume, and then came back through a couple of minutes later when it was busier, and then detonated his bomb. And I actually saw him, or rather his remains, in the blast area on the night. And I'll always remember, because I've got to be careful how I phrase this, because if I give away what my role was in the incident, it will be attributable to who I am. So I've got to be careful how I phrase this. I don't want to sort of give away who I am in case get into a bit of bother at work. But I saw the CCTV footage of the blast, and I was asked, "Do you think that's him?" Pointing to a corpse. And I'm sort of looking at this thing, and I'm looking at this guy who's like 2 feet in front of me. Well, what's left of him? And I said, "Yeah, those are the clothes. Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah." And I remember looking at him, and do you know what? I had no anger towards this guy. I know that might sound strange, but I remember looking at him, and I just thought, "You stupid bastard! You stupid bastard!" The fact that somebody has been able to manipulate you to do this, to brainwash you to do this, you absolute stupid bastard. But yeah, surprisingly, no hatred. I didn't see him as a victim. I didn't pity him, but I just thought, what have you done? That's the way I processed it at the time. Yeah.
It's unfathomable. Yeah, it's hard to imagine what was going on in his brain. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. But I remember the next day, when I woke up, talking about what we call trauma and after effects and that. I remember I woke up, and one of the first few things I do when I wake up is I fire up my phone and fire up social media. I just do that. And I remember seeing on social media these posts that have been shared and retweeted, and they've gone viral, and they were missing posts. My son and his girlfriend went to the concert in Manchester last night and haven't come home. These are the pictures. Do you have any information? Does anybody know anything about what's happened to him? And I didn't recognise the people in the posts, but I knew they were dead. I knew they were, and it's not a comfortable thing to say to people, to strangers, if you want. But I cried. Yeah,
sure.
It brought it out of me. But you know what? I think I was crying for a few minutes, and then I was just sort of sat on the end of my bed, and I thought, well, this is no way to live your life. Get off your ass and get up and get dressed. There's no point sitting here feeling sad. So I did. I went and had a shit shower and shave, and I felt great. Honestly, I just got it all out of my system. It was bizarre. But some of my colleagues, they've got complex post-traumatic stress disorder. They've had to have counselling. It takes its toll on the first responders. Those incidents, it definitely is.
Sure, that's like a scene from war, but it's in it's civilian casualties.
It is, and I have friends who've been in the military, and they said it was like battlefield trauma. People had lost limbs, heavy bleeding. We were saying about equipment and them not trusting us to have it. We're not issued tourniquets. We have quite a bit of first aid kit in our pouches on our belts. But they won't issue us tourniquets.
Really? Why is that? Because people are touting those as very important nowadays.
Absolutely, yeah. So quite a few people. We've got trauma dressings, which have like a tourniquet wrapping on them, but they will not give us the actual, the fabric adjustable tourniquets. And really, those are the ones we need, the adjustable ones, so that you can take the pressure off every 10 minutes and 15 minutes. Just so that the limb, the tissue doesn't start to die in the limb that you put on. But for whatever reason, they won't do it. And our first aid instructors, they are internal, but they're externally accredited. So they work for the BTP, for the British Transport Police, but they are accredited with the St John Ambulance, which is a big multinational first aid. They provide like doctors in Africa. That's that sort of. They're very similar to the Red Cross, if you've heard of the Red Cross.
Yeah.
You know, he said he had a stand-up. They refresh the curriculum for the course every year, and he said he had stand-up arguments with them, saying, "Look, let us teach tourniquets discipline, and if they want to go out and get their own, then let them do that. But I understand that you don't want to issue them because you think that they're going to cause more harm than good, and somehow they're going to cause more harm than good. I don't know, but he, for whatever reason, he couldn't convince them."
It sounds like England and America are obviously very different cultures in a way, but suffering from the same type of things. It's people in charge are so worried about liability and doing the wrong thing that they're having trouble doing the right thing. And we have a bit of that here, of course, as well. It seems, just from talking with you and reading articles and stuff in Great Britain, it seems even worse there. Like they're just too concerned with liability.
Oh yeah, I would say that the litigation culture from parts of the United States has definitely crept in. But I remember there was an incident once where somebody got electrocuted on the overhead lines, and he was actually fleeing police officers, and the family were well known for petty crime. And they actually found a lawyer that specialises in suing the police before they'd even found a funeral directors for the
classy.
For the relative. Oh yeah, really, yeah, absolutely classy. Yeah, that sort of stuff has crept into British culture now, and the press love to blame the police. They love to blame the police for other people's poor decision making.
In California, especially Los Angeles, if you do something wrong, if you're the bad guy and you get arrested and hurt or something like that, you can sue. You can make a claim with the city of Los Angeles, be completely in the wrong, and they'll pay you off because it's cheaper to pay you off and give you a few $1,000s than it is to go to court.
Yeah, they'll settle out of court. Yeah. I mean, we've had that in my force. I mean, we had one incident. This was years ago. I wasn't there, so it's not really my story to tell. But for some reason, one of our police dogs just snapped and attacked a baby in a pram that was being pushed going past. And now, you don't need to settle him. We're not going to court. This kid has got bite marks to the face. We settled out of court for that. I can understand that. I can totally understand that. But there are people that they were fighting with police officers. They've had to be restrained, and the wrist has snapped when they've been handcuffed or while they've been trying to get them in handcuffs. And they will complain about use of force and threaten to sue for damages, and they just pay out. I can't get my head, it's bonkers. I just can't get my head around it.
It's irritating.
Ken, you know what comes to mind?
Go on.
That North Hollywood bank robbery over here in California. When that happened, these two guys armed themselves with AK-47s. They had drum magazines. They were just mowing down cruisers and cops are shooting them with all kinds of weaponry. They had to go to a local store to commandeer AR-15s to kill these guys because of the body armor. And the guys that did this, their families got millions of dollars because the police didn't render first aid to them quickly enough after they were shot. It was like, You're kidding me. These guys go on a rampage, terrorizing a city. And their families are now, filthy rich.
It's the same here. All our firearms officers, they have advanced first aid training. They have oxygen cylinders in the armed response vehicles. The idea is that they shoot somebody to incapacitate them, and then but that person still has a right to life. So you've got to treat them until the ambulance arrives to keep them alive.
I'm not against that. That's fine. But in
but paying out.
The situation I described was it's kind of give the guys the benefit of a doubt.
I mean, I wasn't there. I don't know what the training is or the procedures are for that particular police department. But I'll bet they didn't just stand there watching them bleed to death. I'll bet they didn't. Unless that's what's happened and that's why they got the payout. I don't know, but I just can't see. even the most horrible shitbag of criminal, I just can't see cops in the litigation culture that we live in. I can't see them just standing by and watching somebody die. They would at least try and stop the bleeding or CPR or something.
Well, Ken, I think they thought they were dead, right? They thought they'd killed him.
Well, you're talking about the North Hollywood shootout. That one was where they thought there was so there were 2 guys down, and they thought there was still a third active shooter in the neighborhood, and they wouldn't let the ambulance in because they didn't know if there was still a shooter out there. So the guy ended up bleeding out. But do you risk the lives of medical personnel because you got some dirtbag bleeding out in the street? I don't think so, but
right.
Apparently somebody took issue with that, and you go to court and you get someone to listen to you in a jury, and it just goes from there. But no, they thought there was another shooter, and until they cleared the area, they weren't going to let medical personnel in there.
We've had the same thing, particularly in Northern Ireland. The IRA used to do things, what they used to call come-ons. And what they'd do is they would draw the emergency services to an initial incident and then attack the emergency services that were responding.
Yeah.
It's like a duck hunt, for want of a better description. All these vehicles coming with flashing lights on and then people getting out. It wasn't uncommon for them to do that. And to this day, these extremist dissident groups, they haven't gone away in Northern Ireland. They're still there. And you have to look for the news articles because it all seems to be, it's always in the local news. It never seems to make the national or the international news. But yeah, they're still planting pipe bombs. I have colleagues and prison officer colleagues in Northern Ireland. They still have to check underneath their car every day before they get in.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah, the litigation is out of control. Steve, I don't know if you heard in the news this week, there was this is off topic a little bit, but is on topic. There's a couple in some state, I can't remember where it was, but they're suing McDonald's because McDonald's has quarter pounders with cheese and they didn't want cheese. And they're suing them because McDonald's forced them to have cheese on their burgers and all this stuff. And they found a lawyer filed the lawsuit. So
this is the thing, chaps.
Oof.
These spurious lawsuits, there's always some shark in a suit that wants a commission who's prepared to go to court with this stuff. Or to file the paperwork to put a shot across the bows of a company to try and get them to settle out of court. This is the thing, you see. People have a go at these people that try and sue these companies. But somewhere in this process, there is allegedly an educated person, a lawyer, a legal practitioner that goes, you've got a case. Absolutely. Sign here, no win, no fee, and I'll take this commission if you get a payout.
Yeah. And it happens in the United States. There are lawyers, their sole practice is police litigation, civil rights violations, police litigation. That's all they do. And so there's enough.
Yeah, we've got those. I mean, well, to be fair, in Britain, if you're a lawyer, you tend to have 2 specialisms so that you can broaden what work you deal with. But yeah, we've got lawyers that deal specifically. So if you get found travelling without a ticket on the railway by the railway company and you get booked up by the railway company, there's law firms that specialise in dealing with those kind of cases. And we have got the law firms that specialise in dealing with police lawsuits, and that you'll see them when these crying families are on the news saying that the police shot my baby. They're always holding up the picture of them with their family, or when they were at school, so they're in their school uniform and they look young and angelic.
It sounds like America.
They always have the same phrases like talented footballer, heart of gold, he'd do anything for anybody, had a heart of gold. Other ones that we've had recently, aspiring architect.
He was going to college.
Yes, he was going to college to better himself, but carrying drugs and also firearms. But we won't go into that.
And the timing is amazing because this happens every time. Right at the time that they get shot, they were just going to get their life together and go to college. Then.
And they've just got some bird up the duff. Yeah. There's a baby on the way as well. what anybody think of the orphans and, all that malarkey?
Oh my gosh, give them money.
There's a university not too far from where we live in the city of Claremont, which is a affluent and very liberal city, but one of their colleges has 10-foot by 10-foot mural of Michael Brown dressed in his high school graduation gear.
Just remind me who Michael Brown was.
He was the hands up, don't shoot guy. There was, they shot an unarmed black male and in Ferguson.
Yeah, Ferguson, Missouri.
Oh yes.
And then it came out that he was a thug and not a great guy and wrestled with the officer. But this college, to this day, you can drive down to Claremont and there's a 10-foot by 10-foot mural of how the cops wasted this kid's life. Yeah. Not the other way around.
And the NFL players came on the field holding their hands up, and the newscasters, the CNN, they held their hands up in unison. It was just like this big media blitz of how awful the cops are.
Really help relations with the police and everybody.
These people are out there. They want to stir up these tensions and this hatred because they want the links between the police and the communities to unravel so that they can control these communities with their drugs and their violence. And, the IRA did it. Well, not just the IRA. Some of the loyalist dissidents did it in Northern Ireland. You did not call the police if you had a problem. You called the boys. Mm. And they used to punish drug dealers and things like that on the housing estates. However, they were only punishing those drug dealers because they were competing with them. Because that's how they raised their money. They used to bring drugs over the border,
right,
and stuff like that as well. That's what they did. And that's what it's all about. If they can sour relations between the community and the police, they then step into the vacuum that's left behind in the society, in that community, and they then become the sort of the default law and order.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, this is probably a totally separate podcast, but now they have the Ferguson effect where the cops just don't want to engage the community.
Right. Yeah. Why bother? I'm just going to get in trouble. That type of thing.
Yeah.
Bill, can you lift us up and take us out? We're almost at the 2-hour mark here. Can you tell us a positive situation that you encountered?
Right. So, I was working late shifts, and I noticed in quite a big mainline railway station in the evenings, they tend to lock up at night after the last train, and they close for a few hours before the first train in the morning. But they don't always do it. It depends which rail staff are on for the night shift. And I noticed there was a guy in the waiting room about 3 nights on the bounce, and I thought, well, he's clearly not travelling, so I'll go over and I'll speak to him on this third night. And I said, hi, how's it going? And he was actually from Detroit in Michigan. And what had happened was, he told me a story. He'd met somebody online, he'd met a woman online, and she'd gone over to the US. They got married. She didn't like living over there, and they'd moved back to Britain. And he'd been there for about 2 months, and the marriage just fell apart. And she kicked him out of the house. And he knew nobody. He had nowhere to go to. So he was sleeping rough. He'd been sleeping rough for about 5-6 nights. And he'd been coming to the waiting room in the railway station, because they've got plug sockets, so he could charge his mobile phone up and put some juice on his battery. So I was talking to him and I said, okay, right. So, tell me then, what's your story, man? And he said, she's kicked me out and she's chucked all my stuff in the front garden. I've got nowhere to go to take it. So it's probably all got wet. It's been raining and it's, I've just got the clothes that you see me in now and this rucksack and this bike. He had a mountain bike, a bicycle with him. And I said, look, if you don't mind me asking, do you take drugs? It was a bit of an unusual question, I know, to just ask out of it. And he said, well, I've had marijuana in the past, but I've not over here. I don't know where to buy it, And I said, right, okay, so I'm thinking, right, I've got something I can work with here. I said, do you drink? And he says, I like Jack Daniels, but again, I've not really had a drink since I've been over here at all. I can't think I've not had a beer or anything. And I said, right, listen, look, there's a charity that I know that it's like they run very much on the lines of a commune. So what you do is you go for an interview with them and they decide to accept you as what they call a companion. They don't call them residents. They don't call them service users. They call them companions. You can live in their residential centre. You sign your welfare for what we used to call it. I think it's still called housing benefit. So the local authority pays your rent to them, and that pays for your roof over your head, food and clothes. And the deal is you have to work. So you can go and find a job outside of the commune if you want to. That's fine. Go work 9 to 5 somewhere else, or you can work for them. And what they do is the way that they raise money is if you've got furniture that you don't want, you can just ring them up and they'll come and collect it. And they'll refurbish this furniture. They'll sand it down, they'll repaint it, they'll fix it, whatever. And they sell it in these second-hand stores, these big warehouses. And this charity, I'd done a little bit of work with them before, so I knew a bit about them. And I thought, this guy is he fits their criteria. He's got no drug addiction. He's not an alkie. He's just a guy that's genuinely fallen onto hard times, and he just had a positive attitude about him. Yeah, he was in a bad situation, but he was totally like, look, if you want me to leave, officer, that's fine. I don't want to cause any trouble. I'm like, no, mate, it's raining outside. They're not closing for an hour, so stay here for an hour if you want to. You're not causing any harm. There's been no complaints. But I said, look, is it okay if I take your mobile phone number and pass it to this charity, and I'll get them to give you a call? And he said, yeah, sure, no problem. So I dropped them an email and said, look, can you get in touch with this guy? A couple of bullet points about him. He's found himself on hard times. He's got no home. He's been turning up at the railway station, but they're going to be locking the doors and kicking him out, particularly when it comes towards the weekend. Anyway, yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye, sort of response. Didn't hear anything from them for months. Fast forward a few months, and I was walking up the high street to go and get some food in uniform, and I go past one of their second-hand furniture stores, and sure enough, out comes this guy wearing their uniform T-shirt, and he sort of stopped and looked at me. I stopped and looked at him, and I said, Kyle, and he said, oh, Officer Bill, how are you? And we shook hands. Honestly, it was like seeing an old friend.
That's great.
And I asked him, how are you doing? And, is everything okay? And he said, yeah, this place is great. He says, I've got a job. I've got an income. They're putting a roof over my head. I've met these great people. Unbeknownst to me, he had some sort of a mental health issue. He said, they found me some counselling. And he said, everything's great. And I must have stood there talking to him for about 15, 20 minutes. My food went cold, but I just didn't care. It was just so positive to see this guy. And I've had other experiences like that with people that they're either homeless or they're in insecure housing. They're surfing on the sofas of their friends and things like that. When you get the chance to do that for somebody, nobody can pay you a big enough salary. Honestly, there is awesome. No reward. It is great. And I do quite a bit of work, particularly intelligence sharing, multi-agency information sharing, in some of the towns that I cover railway stations in, to try and problem solve for these people, to try and get them, first of all, away from other drug addicts, try and isolate them away from other drug addicts. And then get them a roof over their head, try and get them drugs treatment. And it's hard, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
They've got to want to reform. If they don't want rehabilitation, they're not going to do it. But if you keep pushing and sort of saying, look, it was cold last night, where are you going to be staying tonight? Oh, I'll be in this multi-story car park. And you say, well, you do realise, that there could be an offer of a room there for you if you're prepared to kick the drugs.
I love that that whole setup you're talking about. I've heard of halfway houses around where I used to live that were privately funded by just donations that did the same thing, where it wasn't a handout. It was you got to stay clean and you got to work and we'll help you, because that's how you help people back on their feet. You don't just give them stuff.
Absolutely
for
correct.
free.
All you have to do is open the door for them. And it's up to them if they walk through that door.
Yeah, let them get
and
their
the other thing is,
pride back.
I'm very... Sorry, say that again?
I said just let them get some pride back, and...
Absolutely. I'm very big on problem solving and trying to tackle the root causes of problem. The broken windows theory that came out of the US, Goldstein, or these sorts of academics that have done research about evidence-based policing and problem-solving policing, and different names, different places call it different things. I'm very big on that sort of stuff, and let's treat homelessness as a problem that enforcement is the last sort of element of it. If they're not engaging with you to try and help themselves, then all right, then let's start locking them up for offences. Let's start getting court orders that ban them from parts of the town centre and certain shops and shopping centres and stuff like that. Let's go down use the carrot first, try and entice them with the carrot, and if it's not working, then beat the living shit out of them with the courts. You know what I mean? With the stick. Really go to town with it. Proper enforce the most minor of offences with them, just to remind them, that it doesn't have to be like this. I can be your best friend or I can be your worst enemy. I'd rather be your friend. That might sound a bit soppy. It might sound a bit sentimentalist, but I genuinely believe I'm watching some of the homeless people that I regularly deal with. I'm watching them die. They will not survive this winter. They're killing themselves. The drug that the homeless, the drug of choice for the homeless that's cheap over here is called Spice.
Spice, wow.
And it's the synthetic cannabinoids.
Yeah, that was around here for a while. Still is, I'm sure. But
it's been here for ages, but it went away for a bit, and now it's come back. And Spice is cheaper than cannabis. It's cheaper than marijuana. And the thing is, we had a spate at one particular railway station that I cover. These people were being found, and it was thought they were dead. And you were calling the ambulance, and you were getting them into the recovery position, and clearing their airway, and then they just let out a wheeze. And by the time the ambulances arrived, they defecated themselves and urinated themselves because they just lost control of their bodily functions when they passed out. But by the time the ambulance arrives, they're sat up, they're talking, they're wondering what all the fuss is about. It's
lovely drug.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you say to them, look, you've shot yourself. Well, this is no way to live your life. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But some of them they don't care. They hate themselves, and so like I say, I'm watching some of these homeless people, particularly younger ones, that they're killing themselves with these drugs, and then I hope it's not me that finds them when their body turns up.
Well, Bill, I like where your head's at. I like where your heart's at, man. I like that. I think that's a good place to end the interview. I think
I like Bill.
I like Bill too.
Bill's cool.
He's our buddy.
Well, I'm glad. I was a little bit nervous about whether I would have interesting enough things to talk about. So thank you very much for your warmth. I appreciate it.
No, I thought it was great, and I was super interested the whole time. And we definitely have you back. I know you have a few more stories in you. I just we're going on 2 hours here, so I don't want to push the limit with the listeners.
No, I totally understand, and thank you very much for your hospitality. I appreciate the invitation to speak.
It was
cool.
Yeah, it was awesome, man. Really appreciate it. I'm really honored that you took the time, and with the big time difference and all that, we scheduled it to come on, and thank you so much. And like I said, if you're not opposed, love to have you back to chat some more.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's good having you, man. I'm glad I met you. This is very engaging for me. I was just having a good time the whole time.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
See you, Bill. Hey, guys. Thank you for joining us. That was a really fun episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Ken and I had a great time interviewing Bill, the special constable from England. Really cool. I've been asking for a cop from another country to come on for a while. Finally got one, and would love to have another one. So if you're in another country and you speak pretty good English, love to have you come on the podcast. I want to urge everybody to join the Facebook page. I've been trying to build that up lately. We're over 400 followers now, and I post the episodes there, and I post other memes and things that pop up and things we talk about on the show. I post there. So go and join the Facebook community if you like that sort of thing. And also, if you haven't, appreciate it if you could go to iTunes, or I guess it's called Apple Podcasts now. If you could go to Apple Podcasts and give the show a 5-star rating, that would help. We're starting to trend. We're getting close to breaking the 200 rank mark in a few different countries, including America, in the true crime category. I'm not sure this is the right category for the podcast, but it previously was in society and culture, which I never felt like was right. And then Apple came out with all these other new categories, so I switched it to true crime subcategory, society and culture. That seemed to make more sense, although now I'm learning true crime is kind of a very specific kind of like what singular story unfolding type of podcast. I didn't know that, so I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but that's been going through my head lately. But anyways, we're starting to chart there, and that's awesome because it just gets more eyes on the podcast. So please go rate and review, and we'll see you next time.